When I was 3 months pregnant, my husband, who was also my superior, Michael Carter, asked me for a divorce. The reason was his sister-in-law, Emily Ross, who had just lost her husband and was also pregnant. Michael said Emily had no one to take care of her, so he wanted to bring her to the military base to look after her and her unborn child. He told me that our divorce would only be temporary, and that once Emily gave birth and was able to raise her baby on her own, he would remarry me. In my previous life, I had refused Michael's request. I clung to our marriage desperately, willing to live or die with it rather than let him go. Because of that, Emily went to the hospital for an abortion. Unfortunately, she suffered massive bleeding during the procedure and died along with her unborn child. From that moment, Michael hated me to the core. When I was 6 months pregnant, he led people to catch me in the act, accusing me of having an affair with a local thug. I was framed, shamed, and scorned by everyone. Michael successfully divorced me and sent me to a labor re-education camp. Life in the camp was unbearably harsh. When I was 8 months pregnant, the heavy labor caused me to give birth prematurely. Both my baby and I died there. The pain and despair before death were still vivid in my memory when, after being reborn, I once again heard Michael pleading with me to divorce him. This time, I didn't hesitate. I nodded and said, "No need to wait for another day. Let's go to the Civil Affairs Bureau and file for divorce right now." I agreed firmly, making only one request, that he pay me $500 in child support expenses. Michael agreed without hesitation. We went straight to the Civil Affairs Bureau. When he held the divorce certificate in his hand, I could see him let out a breath of relief. Clearly, he hadn't expected me to agree so easily. His tone softened as he said, "Anna, don't worry. The divorce is only temporary. Once I make sure Emily and her baby are taken care of, I'll remarry you." I smiled, but it was a cold, mocking smile. The cruel schemes Michael had carried out in my past life to avenge Emily were still vivid in my mind. Even a beast would not harm its own young. Yet, Michael had been ruthless enough to destroy me and the child in my womb for Emily's sake. How could I possibly believe him again? In this life, I only wanted to stay as far away from him as possible. Without responding, I gripped the divorce papers tightly in my hand and walked down the steps. My coldness made Michael hurry after me. His voice grew even gentler. "Anna, without me around, you'll have to take good care of yourself and the baby. If you ever need anything, just tell me." Hearing him speak to me so tenderly made Emily, who had been waiting outside, instantly look displeased. She rolled her eyes, suddenly clutched her stomach, and cried out in pain. "Oh no, my stomach hurts." Michael's face immediately filled with worry. He didn't even glance at me again. He rushed forward, lifted Emily into his arms, and carried her straight to the waiting jeep. Emily wrapped her arms around his neck and looked back at me with a triumphant, mocking smile. Without words, she was declaring that her place in Michael Carter's heart was far more important than mine ever had been. In my previous life, I never realized that Michael had secretly loved Emily all along. Because he served in the military, he didn't truly know what kind of woman she was. But I did. I had lived with her day and night. I knew Emily Ross all too well. She was beautiful, loved dressing up, and enjoyed the attention of men around her. Even before she married Michael's younger brother, Daniel Carter, she already had plenty of admirers. And even after marrying him, that number didn't decrease in the slightest. In my previous life, whenever Daniel was away on duty, I more than once saw Emily sneaking strange men into the house, having secret affairs behind his back. That was why, when Daniel met with his unfortunate accident and died, and Michael said he wanted to take care of Emily and the baby she carried, I had tried to warn him. I told him the child in Emily's womb might not be Daniel's. It could very well belong to some other man. But Michael didn't believe me. He scolded me harshly, accusing me of slandering Emily and damaging her reputation. I felt deeply wronged. I couldn't understand why telling the truth made me the villain in his eyes. It wasn't until later, after Michael had plotted against me and ruined my life, that I finally learned the truth. Among Emily's many lovers, Michael himself was one of them. That hypocrite. Michael had been secretly involved with Emily long before Daniel's death. He regarded the child in her womb as his own, so of course he wanted to give her a name, a title, and an explanation. In my previous life, I was blind to the truth and paid for my naivety with my own death. In this life, I chose to walk away on my own terms, to let them have each other, and to watch with my own eyes how the two of them would end up. It took me 2 hours to walk home from the Civil Affairs Bureau. When I was nearly at my doorstep, I saw a man loitering outside, glancing around nervously like a thief. With just one look, I recognized him. It was Carl Moore, the lowlife who, in my past life, had been caught in bed with me by Michael. What the hell was that bastard doing in front of my house? I frowned. In my previous life, I had often seen Carl sneaking around at night to meet Emily. I had even suspected that the baby in Emily's womb was his. I told Michael about it back then, but he didn't believe me. Later, after Emily miscarried and died from heavy bleeding, Carl had come looking for me. He threatened me, saying I had to pay with blood. Not long after that, Michael caught me in the act with Carl, using that as an excuse to destroy me completely. Those two beasts, Michael Carter and Carl Moore, had colluded in my past life to take revenge on me for Emily. Two shameless men bound together by their obsession with that vile woman. Their so-called love for her was anything but ordinary. I wondered whether Michael and Carl had ever known about each other's relationship with Emily. Probably not. The thought made my lips curl into a cold smile. If they ever found out that both of them had been lying under the same woman's skirt, I wondered what their faces would look like. As I was thinking that, Carl suddenly approached me with an ingratiating grin. "Hey, Anna," he said cheerfully, "where have you been?" I let out a cold laugh. Where else? To get divorced, of course. When he saw the divorce papers in my hand, his eyes lit up with excitement. "You really divorced Michael?" "Yes," I said flatly. "Michael wants to take care of Emily and her baby, so he forced me to divorce him. He probably thinks I don't know what filthy schemes he's been hiding, but I know better than anyone." Kai froze. "What do you mean?" "What else could it mean?" I sneered. "Michael Carter and that cheap woman Emily Ross have been having an affair all along." Then I laughed bitterly. And Emily didn't just fool around with Michael. There's also Tom, from the thermal power plant, and Rick, from the boiler factory. There was also Leo from the mechanical factory. I cracked my knuckles and sneered. That cheap woman really does have some talent, doesn't she? There must be 7 or 8 men out there, and who knows which one is the father of the bastard in her belly. Maybe Rick, maybe someone else. When Carl Moore first saw the divorce papers in my hand, he looked positively delighted. But as soon as I began listing all of Emily Ross's lovers, his face turned pale as chalk. He had always thought he was the only man in Emily's life, always believed the baby she carried belonged to him. Carl was a handsome man on the surface, but lazy and broke. After Emily got pregnant, he couldn't even afford to help raise the child. So, he and Emily had schemed to make Michael Carter the scapegoat, to trick him into taking responsibility. Carl had always believed Emily married Michael, just to use him to raise her child. Now that he realized Michael and Emily had a secret relationship of their own, how could he not be furious? In my previous life, after Emily's death, those two scumbags, Michael and Carl, blamed me. They joined forces to set me up and destroy me. This time, I wanted to see those filthy hypocrites tear each other apart. Carl stormed off, face dark with rage. I gave a cold laugh and went back home. Since I had already divorced Michael Carter, I needed to plan for my own future. The child inside me could not stay. I had to get rid of it as soon as possible. Neither Michael nor Emily was a good person. They were shameless, cruel, and deceitful. I had to think ahead if I wanted to avoid repeating the same tragic fate. Back in my room, I opened my drawer and took out my few $100s in savings. I stitched the money into the lining of my clothes. Just as I finished sewing, Michael came home, with Emily Ross in his arms. Emily leaned against him like she had no bones in her body, whining softly. When she saw me come out, she wrapped her arms around him and said in a frail voice, "I can't walk anymore, Michael. Carry me to the room, please." Michael didn't even bother to hide it anymore. Right in front of me, he picked her up and carried her straight into the bedroom. Soon, I heard Emily's coquettish laughter echoing through the house. It went on for quite a while before Michael finally came out. He had the audacity to speak to me as if nothing was wrong. "Emily's anemic," he said coolly. "She needs to be nourished. Go buy a chicken and make her some soup." Ever since marrying Michael Carter, I had never spent a single cent of his money. Every bit of his salary went to his mother and younger brother. I used to think he was being filial and generous. Now I realized it wasn't filial piety or kindness, it was indifference. I had never been in his heart. To him, I was nothing more than a free servant for his family. In my past life, I had been foolish. I didn't see his cruelty until it was too late, until I was dying. But not this time. If he thought he could use me again, he was dreaming. I lifted my head, looked straight at Michael, and said calmly, "All right then, give me the money, and I'll go buy a chicken for Emily." Michael was used to ordering me around, used to me spending my own money while he didn't lift a finger. Now that I dared to ask him for money, his face darkened immediately. "Can't you pay for it first?" he snapped. "I don't have any money," I replied flatly. "What about your salary?" he demanded. "My salary's gone. I've been married to you for 3 years, and you haven't given me a single dollar. Do you expect me to live on air? On top of that, your mother shows up every few days asking me for money or food. I'm not a printing machine, Michael. Where do you think the money's supposed to come from?" I met his eyes and said each word clearly. "You promised to give me $500 to support me and the baby after the divorce. It's time to keep your word. Give me the money." Michael's expression grew darker. "I don't have that much right now," he said coldly. I narrowed my eyes. "So you plan to break your promise?" "Michael Carter, you said you wanted to take care of Emily Ross. Fine, I've already stepped aside and made that happen for you. But you can't possibly be this shameless, can you? The baby inside me is your flesh and blood. You're going to give me the money, right now." "If you don't," I didn't finish the sentence, but Michael understood perfectly what would come after "if you don't." If anyone found out about his secret affair with Emily Ross, it wouldn't be a small matter. If he wanted to keep his current position, his reputation, and the privileges that came with them, he needed to keep me quiet. In the end, he reluctantly handed me the $500. Then, with a dark expression, he stormed off to the market to buy a chicken. When Emily learned that Michael had given me money just to shut me up, she was furious. She was no longer lying weakly in bed, pretending to be fragile. Instead, she stomped over to find me, her face twisted with jealousy. "Anna," she snapped, "what gives you the right to take Michael's money?" I let out a cold laugh. "What gives me the right? You really don't know? That money is what Michael owes me. He doesn't want me to expose your dirty little affair, so of course he has to pay for my silence." Emily hadn't expected me to strip away her pretenses so bluntly. She froze for a second, then laughed mockingly. "Oh, so you already know, huh? Then there's no point hiding it anymore." Her tone turned triumphant. "Michael loves me," she said proudly. "I'm not afraid to tell you. On my wedding night with Daniel, I was actually with Michael." Shameless. I never imagined those two vile creatures could be that disgusting. Seeing my expression darken, Emily looked even more delighted. She became bolder, her voice brimming with arrogance as she described her affair with Michael in disgusting detail. "That night, Daniel was drunk and passed out," she said with a smirk. "I couldn't stand the thought of serving him, so my mother-in-law, Mrs. Brown, called Michael over to help. And right there, beside Daniel, Michael and I held each other." No wonder Michael cared for Emily so much. No matter what, he was determined to divorce me and give Emily and her baby a proper home. Michael had been with Emily long before Daniel's death. He probably believed he was the only man she'd ever been with, that he was her great love. He adored her so deeply that even when I told him she had been sleeping with Carl Moore and several other men, he refused to believe me. I thought to myself, fine, may he get what he wants in this life. Let him be bound to Emily Ross forever, and may they never be apart. Emily's eyes dropped to my stomach, and her tone turned cold. "Since you already know everything, Anna, stop dreaming about getting back together with Michael. You should get rid of that baby." I stared at her, my voice icy. "Why should I? Michael's the one who said he'd remarry me. What right do you have to tell me to end my pregnancy?" Emily sneered. "You still think you can give birth to that child? Let me tell you something. Michael already told me himself. He'll never let that baby be born. Within 3 days, he'll make sure the child inside you dies without even a grave to be buried in." I believed her. After all, in my previous life, Michael had been cruel enough to destroy both me and our unborn child. If he planned to do it again this time, then I wouldn't hold back either. I would take revenge for both lives, every ounce of hatred, every ounce of pain. When Michael returned, he brought not only an old hen, but also his mother, Mrs. Brown. While he was in the kitchen slaughtering the chicken, Mrs. Brown came to my room. She glared at me with her sharp triangular eyes and said coldly, "I'm sick. I have to go to the city hospital for treatment. I need $500. Give it to me now. Since the day I married Michael Carter, Mrs. Brown had never treated me kindly. She always thought I was too dull, too stiff, not sweet-tongued enough, unworthy of her precious son. No matter how much money I gave her, no matter how much food I bought for her, nothing was ever enough. Mrs. Brown had never liked me. She adored Emily Ross, the sweet-talking, fake, delicate type. Emily had never given her a single dollar or helped her with anything, yet all she had to do was flutter her lashes, call her mom a few times in that honeyed voice, and massage her shoulders a little. That was enough to make Mrs. Brown beam with joy, parading around bragging that Emily was the most filial daughter-in-law in the world. She probably still thought I was the same foolish Anna as before, the woman willing to be treated like a mule, silently enduring her torment. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I looked at her coldly and said, "Old woman, if you need money, go ask your son Michael or your precious daughter-in-law Emily. Why come to me? I'm an outsider now. Your son and I are divorced." Mrs. Brown clearly hadn't expected me to refuse her. She exploded instantly, shouting insults. "You wretched jinx! How dare you talk back to me? Who gave you the nerve to demand $500 from Michael? You think you're worth that much? Take a good look at yourself. You're lucky anyone ever married you at all." I smirked. "Whether I'm worth that money or not isn't for you to decide. That money came from your dear son and your beloved daughter-in-law, who couldn't wait to be together. They paid to buy my silence." "You liar," Mrs. Brown screamed. "How dare you slander my son? Do you want me to slap you to death right now?" I stood up and met her glare. "You should watch your mouth. If you make me angry and I shout right now, wouldn't all the neighbors come running? They'd love some gossip to talk about over tea." Mrs. Brown's face turned crimson with rage, but she didn't dare strike me. She knew very well that if the neighbors learned about Michael and Emily's affair, it would destroy the family's reputation. After glaring at me with venomous eyes, she turned around and stormed off, seething. Michael had brought his mother home, hoping she might help him get back the money he'd given me. But once again, their plan failed miserably. Those three vile people were not the kind to let things go easily. Soon after, Mrs. Brown came back, arrogant as ever, calling me into the kitchen to start a fire and make chicken soup. Meanwhile, she and Michael hid away in the bedroom with Emily, whispering secretly among themselves. I quietly slipped out the back door and crept to the window behind the room. From there, I could hear everything. Mrs. Brown's voice was filled with venom. "Anna already knows about you and Emily," she said to Michael. "She dared to open her mouth and demand that outrageous sum. She's not going to stay quiet for long. We'd better end this before she causes trouble." Emily quickly agreed. "Exactly. I'm worried Anna might stir things up too. We need to get rid of her once and for all." Michael's voice was low, but cold. At first, I thought if she behaved and stayed quiet, I'd let her live. But now that she knows everything, she's a risk. We'll take care of it tonight. Emily gasped softly. "You already have a plan?" Michael nodded. "To keep her from exposing us, we have to act first. I've already arranged for someone to catch her with another man, and I've prepared the drug. Everything's ready." So, it was the same plan as in my past life. They were going to frame me again, ruin me, and destroy everything I had. I smirked coldly and turned back toward the kitchen. The aroma of chicken soup filled the air. I lifted the lid and scooped out both drumsticks, the wings, and all the best breast meat. 2 full bowls of it. Then I sat down in the kitchen and ate heartily, grease smearing my lips as satisfaction filled my chest. By the time I had finished the meat and drunk 2 big bowls of soup, Michael and Mrs. Brown had finished their plotting and came into the kitchen. Mrs. Brown feigned casualness, asking, "Is the chicken soup ready? If it is, let's set the table." But when her eyes caught the chicken bones scattered on the floor, her face turned crimson. She rushed to the stove, yanked off the lid, and saw that inside the pot there was nothing left but bones and giblets. Her expression twisted with fury. "You greedy little tramp," she shouted. "There are so many people in this house, and you ate it all yourself?" Mrs. Brown shouted furiously. "Can't you show a little respect?" As she yelled, she lunged at me, ready to strike, but I wasn't about to stand there and take it. When she charged forward, I stepped aside and kicked a chair toward her. Mrs. Brown lost her balance and fell hard. Her front teeth hit the edge of the chair with a sharp crack, and a horrible scream tore through the kitchen. Her 2 front teeth flew out, blood splattering across the floor. She wailed in pain, shrieking so loud it pierced the walls. She had never suffered humiliation like that in her life. Her mouth, now missing teeth, could barely form words as she stammered. "Michael! Hit her! Kill that filthy whore for me! Do it now!" Michael didn't move, not because he didn't want to, but because he had other plans for me that night. His fists clenched tightly as he glared at me, eyes blazing. "Anna, you've gone too far. How dare you hit my mother? If anything happens to her, don't blame me for what comes next." After shouting, he helped his mother up and led her out of the kitchen. On the other side, Emily Ross came running when she heard the commotion. She and Michael each grabbed one of Mrs. Brown's arms and helped her outside. Mrs. Brown cried all the way, her voice nasally and broken from her missing teeth. She howled about how I didn't care for the household, how I was always running off somewhere, how I scolded her over nothing, refused to let her eat, and now, worst of all, had laid hands on her. It was all a setup. That miserable family was covering their tracks, fabricating accusations against me so that when they framed me later that night, no one would sympathize. Since they were so ruthless, I had no reason to hold back anymore. Tonight, we would see who would win. By 7 that evening, Michael, Mrs. Brown, and Emily finally returned home. I sat silently in my room, waiting. Half an hour later, Michael pushed the door open, carrying a bowl of brown sugar and egg soup in his hands. For once, he was smiling. "You must be hungry," he said softly. "I made this for you. I know the divorce upset you, but Anna, there's really nothing between me and Emily. I only take care of her because of Daniel. Don't listen to the gossip. And as for my mother, you know how she is. Don't take her words to heart." If I were still the Anna from my past life, those words might have moved me to tears. I might have believed him and melted at his tone, but I had already died once because of this man. I stared coldly into his eyes. "Your affair isn't gossip, Michael. Emily told me herself. She said that on her wedding night, you two were already together, right beside Daniel." Michael froze. Clearly, he hadn't expected Emily to spill that secret. His face stiffened, but he quickly forced a weak smile. "Emily must have been talking nonsense. Don't believe her. I'm not that kind of man." "Why would she lie?" I asked icily. "Who's foolish enough to drag themselves through the mud for no reason? And by the way, she also said the child she's carrying is yours." "That's impossible," Michael snapped, though his voice wavered. "I'll talk to her. I'll make her explain it to you." He hurriedly held out the bowl to me. "Anna, drink this first. Then I'll call Emily over so we can clear this up." Of course, he just wanted to see me drink the egg soup he'd laced with drugs, to make sure I swallowed his trap willingly. I took the bowl and drank every drop right in front of him. Watching me finish, Michael's shoulders relaxed. He picked up the chopsticks from the table and turned to leave, pretending to sound thoughtful. "If you're tired, take off your shoes and rest. You've been through a lot today." I obediently removed my shoes and lay down on the bed, playing along. As he turned to leave, I caught the faint smirk curling at the corner of his lips, a cold, sinister smile. Then he closed the door behind him. About half an hour later, a shadow moved quietly down the hall. Someone crept to my door and pushed it open just enough to slip inside. 15 minutes after that, Mrs. Brown, her mouth still missing those 2 front teeth, tiptoed up to my door, pressing her ear against it to eavesdrop. From outside my room came the creaking of the bed frame, slow, rhythmic, unmistakable. The sound of weight shifting and straining against the old wood carried through the quiet night. Mrs. Brown's lips curled into a sly, triumphant grin. She turned and hurried out of the house, muttering under her breath with venom, "You shameless tramp. Enjoy it while you can. Tonight will be the night you die." Her hatred over losing those 2 teeth seemed to fuel her, and she practically flew across the yard. Moments later, she was at the door of our neighbor, Mr. Thompson. "Mr. Thompson," she cried breathlessly. "Emily's having terrible stomach pains. Michael isn't home. He had to go out on business. Can you and Mrs. Thompson help us take her to the hospital?" Mr. Thompson immediately agreed, of course, but Mrs. Brown didn't stop there. Claiming that it was too dark and unsafe to travel alone at night, she called for 4 or 5 more families from nearby to come help. In no time, more than 10 people had gathered behind her, following her back toward the house. But instead of rushing to help Emily, Mrs. Brown stopped in front of my room. She pounded on the door and shouted, "Anna, Emily's in pain. She needs to go to the hospital. Bring her a pair of maternity pants, quick." Without waiting for me to answer, she shoved the door open. A second later, her shrill scream tore through the house like a slaughtered hen's cry. "Who the hell is that?" "Anna! There's a man in your bed, you filthy, disgusting whore! How dare you cheat on my son behind his back?" She lunged forward, ripping the blanket off the bed with both hands, ready to drag the supposed man into the light. But when the blanket flew off, her triumphant expression froze. There was no man. In fact, there was no one. Not even me. Mrs. Brown stood there, dumbfounded, her mouth hanging open. Behind her, Mrs. Thompson, Mrs. Lee, and Miss Parker, all the nosy neighbors who had come running, peeked in curiously. When they saw nothing but a large wooden crate under the blanket, they gasped in unison. "Wait, what did you just say?" Mrs. Thompson demanded. "Anna was having an affair? Are you sure we heard that right?" "This doesn't look like an affair to me," added Mrs. Lee, folding her arms. Mrs. Brown's face turned pale. She couldn't understand how everything had gone so wrong. She had seen Carl Moore sneak into my room with her own eyes. She had heard the bed creak, heard the noises, yet now both he and I were gone without a trace. She clawed at her hair, stammering, unable to come up with a single explanation. Then, from somewhere outside, my voice suddenly rang out. Loud, broken, filled with rage and grief. "I can't live like this anymore. Michael Carter, you heartless bastard. You've been sneaking around with Emily Ross behind my back. Are you even human?" The group of neighbors froze for a second, then, startled by my cry, they all rushed toward the direction of my voice. The door to Emily's room flew open. Inside, I stood gripping a rolling pin, swinging it wildly. Michael was completely naked, blood dripping down his face, and Emily clung to him desperately, trying to cover herself with a blanket. "Didn't you say you were going out for work?" I shouted as I struck him again. "Turns out your work was between Emily's sheets." Michael stumbled, shielding his head as I hit him, my tears burning down my cheeks. "You dog! You heartless traitor! Do you even deserve to call yourself Daniel's brother?" I turned to Emily, screaming, "And you cheap, shameless woman! I pitied you when your husband died. I gave you food, I gave you money, I treated you like family, and this is how you repay me? By crawling into bed with my husband?" I swung again, the rolling pin cracking against the side of the bed. "You disgust me. How can you live with yourself? Does your conscience not ache at all?" The crowd at the doorway stared, stunned. I pointed straight at the trembling pair and shouted, "Everyone, look closely. These two shameless creatures, Michael Carter and Emily Ross, have been having an affair right under my nose. They've humiliated me long enough. They've treated me like dirt, like a beast of burden, like I'm not even human." My chest heaved, and my voice broke as I cried out, "Why does my life have to be like this? This whole rotten family isn't even human." They had lived off me for years, eating my food, drinking my water, ordering me around as if I were their servant, and still had the audacity to betray me like this. Everyone who had gathered outside, drawn by my sobbing and shouting, began to whisper among themselves. "This is too much," someone said. "His wife is pregnant, and he's fooling around like an animal." "Exactly," another woman muttered. "There are so many women in the world. Why did he have to go after his sister-in-law? And right under his wife's nose, too? Disgusting. Shameless," an old man added, shaking his head. "No morals left at all. What kind of people do something like this?" "Even with all these people watching, they still won't stop," someone gasped. "How brazen can you get?" Michael's groans grew louder. At first, everyone thought it was from the beating I was giving him, but as time passed, they realized something was off. Neither he nor Emily Ross was trying to separate from the other. They were writhing together, their faces twisted in agony. Then someone shouted in shock, "Wait, are they stuck together? Oh my God!" Gasps and exclamations rippled through the crowd. "Unbelievable. I've never seen anything like this in my life." Michael and Emily screamed in pain, their voices echoing through the house. I continued to cry and shout, my words sharp as knives. Michael Carter claimed he just wanted to help take care of his dead brother's wife. He gave her all his salary and allowance, insisted on bringing her into the base so he could look after her, and then forced me to divorce him. He swore that after Emily gave birth, he'd marry me again. I was stupid enough to believe him. And now look, he's been sneaking around with her all along. Gasps and murmurs grew louder among the crowd. "Daniel's only been dead 3 months, someone whispered. "But Emily's already 2 months pregnant. Doesn't take a genius to figure out whose baby that is." "Exactly," another voice said darkly. A wild beast wouldn't hurt its own mate, yet this man abandons his pregnant wife to take care of another woman's child? I'd bet my life that baby's his. Poor Daniel. Someone else muttered. He's barely been gone long enough for the grass to grow on his grave, and his own brother's already sleeping with his widow. Michael Carter really is a monster. I wouldn't be surprised, another neighbor added grimly. Affairs like this often end in tragedy. I wouldn't be shocked if they had something to do with Daniel's death. The crowd that Mrs. Brown had gathered to humiliate me was now gossiping furiously. But this time, every word was about Michael and Emily. Mrs. Brown, standing off to the side, was growing more frantic by the second. Her eyes darted around wildly as she tried to shout over the noise. Everyone, go home, she yelled hoarsely. This isn't what it looks like. Go on, get out of here. But no one listened. After all, she had been the one to drag them here in the first place. How could they possibly leave now, when the spectacle was just getting good? In fact, more people were gathering by the minute. Neighbors, workers passing by, even curious strangers. The Carter house had never been so crowded. The place was packed wall to wall, yet Michael still couldn't, or wouldn't, pull away from Emily. Their pitiful screams only fueled the whispers spreading through the crowd like wildfire, echoing for blocks. Seeing that the situation had spiraled out of control, Mrs. Brown finally realized it couldn't be salvaged. But when she saw me still striking Michael, his head and face covered in blood, she lost all reason. Stop it, she screamed, lunging at me. Stop hitting him right now. Of course I didn't stop. The hatred of 2 lifetimes burned in my veins. I swung again and again, every blow heavier than the last. Mrs. Brown, overwhelmed by the sight of her bloodied son, shoved me violently. I had been exhausted from the fight, and her push sent me tumbling backward. I let out a piercing scream as I hit the ground, clutching my stomach in agony. My baby, I cried, my voice breaking. The neighbors panicked. Several of them rushed forward, helping me up, their hands trembling as they saw the blood spreading beneath me. Call for a car, someone shouted. We have to get her to the hospital. Within minutes, they carried me out the door and down the street. Of course, the baby couldn't be saved, but that had been my plan all along. I had already taken abortion medicine earlier that day. This was just the perfect cover. From the moment I came back to life, I never intended to keep that child. Everything that happened that night, the chaos, the scandal, the humiliation, had been part of my counterattack. Their plot to frame me had become the stage for my revenge. After overhearing Michael Carter's plan to drug me and destroy me again, I had prepared my own trap. Just like in my previous life, Michael Carter had planned something vicious to destroy me, but this time, I was ready for him. The moment I overheard their conversation, I devised my own counterattack. I deliberately ate all the best parts of the chicken, the drumsticks and the tender breast meat, knowing it would infuriate Mrs. Brown. In this house, I had never been allowed to touch anything good. Every treat, every luxury, always went to Michael, Emily Ross, and Mrs. Brown. I knew that once Mrs. Brown saw I had eaten the choicest pieces, she would lose her temper completely and start cursing me. I needed her anger. It was the perfect spark for my plan to unfold. And it worked. She stormed into the kitchen, screamed at me, and ended up losing her 2 front teeth in the chaos. Michael, of course, immediately saw the opportunity to use it against me. To destroy my reputation and prepare for his nighttime scheme, he made sure everyone in the neighborhood saw him and Emily supporting Mrs. Brown on their way to the clinic, loudly cursing my name as they went. That public spectacle was exactly what I had been waiting for. While they were out, I slipped into Emily's room. From where I hid under her window earlier, I had already seen Michael hand her the drug meant for me, the one he planned to use to ruin me again. Emily had put it into her bedside drawer. I switched the drug with another powder I had prepared. Then I set the first part of my plan in motion, turning their own trap back on them. Ever since Emily became pregnant, Michael had treasured the child she carried. Every night, he made her a glass of warm milk before bed. So I opened the tin of powdered milk and mixed in the drug he'd meant for me. I knew Emily would drink it that night, just like always, and when she did, a lovely surprise would be waiting for her and Michael Carter both. After I laced the milk and replaced the decoy drug in her drawer, I returned to my room, grabbed a few bricks from the yard, and waited. That evening, after spending hours at the hospital discussing their plan, the 3 of them, Michael, Mrs. Brown, and Emily, finally came home. Michael had no idea I had switched the powder. Confident in his scheme, he took the drug that was now harmless and used it to make a bowl of brown sugar egg soup for me. I ate it all right in front of him. When he saw me finish, his face relaxed. He thought the drug was working, that soon I would lose control just as I had in my past life, when he and his cronies had framed me for adultery, humiliating me before everyone. To make it believable, Michael planned to leave the house afterward, pretending to run errands while waiting for the scene to explode. Once I was disgraced, he'd come back as the tragic, betrayed husband, but as fate would have it, his plan never had a chance. Before he could leave, Emily called him over, her body already reacting to the drug she'd unknowingly taken. She couldn't control herself, clinging to him, touching him, begging him to stay. Michael hesitated. He wasn't a good man, he never had been. Tempted by the situation, he gave in, thinking he'd enjoy himself for a while and then sneak out through the window before Mrs. Brown returned with the neighbors to catch me. But things didn't go as he imagined. I had anticipated every move. When Carl Moore crept into my room, I was waiting in the dark with a brick in my hand. The moment he stepped inside, I swung with all my strength and struck his head. He collapsed instantly, unconscious before he even hit the floor. My hatred for that vile man ran deep. He had helped destroy my life once before. So I didn't stop there. Gripping the bloodied brick, I aimed lower and brought it down again, hard. His screams never came. His body twitched once and went still. By the time I dropped the brick, Carl Moore would never again be a man. When I later heard Mrs. Brown's footsteps outside my door, I deliberately made the bed creak. Loud, rhythmic, unmistakable, just as she had hoped to hear. Convinced her plan had succeeded, she hurried off to gather witnesses. The moment she was gone, I dragged Carl's unconscious body out of my room and dumped him by the latrine at the back of the house. Then I returned quietly to my room, cleaned up, and waited. Meanwhile, on the other side of the house, Michael and Emily were deep in their own battle, completely consumed by the drug's effects. Their shameless moans filled the air, so loud that even heaven itself must have been disgusted. Those two shameless people, Michael Carter and Emily Ross, were completely terrified when I stormed into their room, blocking their path with the rolling pin. Emily was so shocked that her body locked up completely, trapping Michael in place as he tried to escape. That was how they both ended up surrounded by half the neighborhood, everyone witnessing firsthand the obscene spectacle of their disgrace. And then, to top it all off, the crowd watched me collapse in pain and lose my child because of the shock and stress they caused. The neighbors who carried me to the hospital were full of sympathy. Along the way, they tried to comfort me, their voices filled with pity and outrage. When we arrived, I was rushed into the operating room, and the doctor performed the abortion procedure. Meanwhile, Michael and Emily, still physically stuck together from the effects of the drug, were also taken to the hospital for emergency treatment. It was a scandal unlike anything anyone in the county had ever seen. The news spread like wildfire, first from one person to 10, then from 10 to hundreds. Crowds gathered from every corner just to see the fallen officer and his lover for themselves. By the time the ambulance arrived, there were so many onlookers that the hospital staff had to push through a sea of people. Michael and Emily were laid on the same stretcher, covered under a single white sheet, and trailed by hundreds of gossiping witnesses. It was a scene so absurd it would be retold for generations. Later, I overheard that it had taken the doctors hours, like 9 bulls and 2 tigers, as the saying went, to finally separate the two of them. When I stepped out of the operating room, the corridors and waiting areas were buzzing with chatter. Everywhere I turned, people were whispering about the scandal. "My God, it's disgusting," one woman said. "Can you believe it? Naked together like animals." "Yeah, and to think, they're husband and sister-in-law," another replied. "That family lives right next door to me. The man's a military officer, always looks so serious and proper. Who would have thought he was rotten to the core?" "I heard the baby in her belly isn't her late husband's," someone added. "It's his brother's." "That Emily Ross was notorious even before her husband died," said another. "That child couldn't possibly belong to her dead husband. If it's not Michael's, then it must be one of the others. She's had so many lovers, who can keep track?" "Still," an old man muttered, "illicit affairs like that often lead to tragedy. Maybe Daniel didn't die by accident. Maybe that adulterous pair had something to do with it." The others nodded grimly. I wouldn't put it past them. Apparently, a woman whispered, Michael's mother, Mrs. Brown, knew about the whole thing, and she even tried to frame her pregnant daughter-in-law to cover it up. Right? Another chimed in. The only reason everyone found out was because Mrs. Brown herself dragged the neighbors over to the house that night. I heard she used Emily's stomach pains as an excuse to call for help, then stormed into Anna's room shouting that she was having an affair. But when she threw open the door, Anna wasn't even there. Unbelievable, someone else said. That family's insane. Good thing Anna kept her wits about her, or she'd have fallen right into their trap. By the way, another added, someone found that thug Carl Moore near the outhouse, unconscious, bleeding all over the place. Maybe this whole thing has something to do with him too. That makes sense, a man agreed. Carl's been sneaking around with Emily for ages. Maybe Emily, Michael, and Mrs. Brown tried to set him up too. But Carl's no pushover. If that's true, his family will definitely step in to settle the score. Listening to their gossip, I couldn't help but smile. My plan had worked perfectly. Without resting, I immediately called Michael's military unit and filed an official complaint. I reported him for moral misconduct and inappropriate relations with a woman under his care. The officer on the other end of the line was shocked but professional. He promised that an investigation team would be sent right away to verify the claims. Only then did I finally allow myself to return to the hospital room and rest. I knew that after the chaos of last night, things could never be covered up again. No matter how capable or well-connected Michael Carter was, this time there was no way out for him. What I didn't expect, however, was that fate still had another surprise waiting for me. That morning, my neighbor, Mrs. Turner, came to visit me at the hospital. She leaned in close, her voice full of excitement as she whispered, Anna, you won't believe it. Michael Carter got beaten up at the hospital last night. I kept my face calm even as a surge of satisfaction rose inside me. Really? Who did it? I asked, feigning surprise. Who else? Mrs. Turner said, lowering her voice even more. The Cole family. They came straight to the hospital and beat him half to death. They say 3 of his ribs are broken, and one of his eyes was so badly damaged it burst. I gasped, pretending to be shocked. Oh my, what happened? Why would they do that? Mrs. Turner gave me a look filled with pity. You poor girl. You've been used and betrayed, and you don't even know it. But don't you worry. God's watching over you. He's finally giving you justice. She went on, relaying the story in vivid detail. Apparently last night, Emily Ross went to see Carl Moore. Nobody knows what she said to him, but after he followed her, he never came back. Early this morning, they found him unconscious beside your outhouse, barely alive and covered in blood. The Cole family rushed him to the hospital, and though they managed to save his life, he's crippled now. His manhood is gone. Mrs. Turner wrinkled her nose in disgust. When Carl finally woke up, he was in so much pain he wanted to die. But before he passed out again, he told his family everything about his affair with Emily Ross and all her filthy schemes. That woman wasn't just sleeping with your husband, you know? She had Carl wrapped around her finger, too. He thought the baby in her belly was his, so he did everything she told him to. Last night, Emily told him she and you didn't get along and said he should sneak into your room and rape you. To help her vent her anger, she said. But the moment he stepped inside, someone knocked him out cold. Mrs. Turner looked at me curiously. Anna, tell me the truth. Were you the one who hit him? Of course not, I said firmly, shaking my head. Last night, I drank the brown sugar egg soup Michael brought me. It made me feel bloated, so I kept going to the bathroom. You know how it is, pregnant women have to go often. Oh, that's true, Mrs. Turner nodded quickly. When I was expecting, I was up half the night running to the toilet. I continued calmly. When I came back from the bathroom, I passed by Emily's room and heard strange noises. I thought it was odd. Her husband's been dead for months, so who could she be with? I pressed my ear to the door and listened, and that's when I heard Michael's voice. I was furious. I grabbed the rolling pin and stormed in. Mrs. Turner's eyes widened. So that's how it happened. You're lucky, Anna, that Carl Moore was lured there by Emily herself to hurt you. The one who knocked him out must have been Michael Carter. You're pregnant. There's no way you could have done that kind of damage. I nodded quietly, letting her believe exactly what she wanted. Mrs. Turner sighed, shaking her head in disapproval. When the Cole family heard what Carl said, they went wild. They realized Michael and Emily had set him up. And the Coles, they're not the kind of people to forgive easily. They sent a few strong young men to the hospital and beat Michael within an inch of his life. Broke his bones, smashed his face, took out his eye. He was screaming so loud the whole ward heard it. I didn't interrupt as she went on. And Emily didn't get away either. When she saw what happened to Michael, she tried to sneak off, but the Cole family caught her outside the hospital. You can bet they didn't let her go easily, not after what she did to Carl. I lowered my gaze to hide the faint smile tugging at my lips. Everything was unfolding exactly as it should. After the savage beating she took, Emily Ross began to hemorrhage. The baby was lost, and her uterus had to be removed. She would never be able to have children again. That was, without a doubt, the best news I'd heard in a long time. I felt a surge of grim satisfaction deep in my chest. Next came the part I'd been waiting for, the disciplinary action from Michael Carter's military unit. Wasn't this exactly what he'd schemed so hard for? He'd gone to great lengths to divorce me, plotting every step just so he could live happily ever after with Emily. Well, now I wanted to see how strong their so-called love was once the consequences came crashing down. The investigation team from the base arrived the very next day. By then, everyone in the county knew what had happened between Michael Carter and Emily Ross. The investigators didn't even need to work hard. Witnesses, gossip, and evidence were everywhere. The unit's leadership didn't show him any leniency. Michael Carter was immediately expelled from the army. When he regained consciousness in the hospital and learned of the decision, he let out one miserable cry before fainting again. 3 days later, I was discharged. When I returned home, I found Mrs. Brown in my kitchen, cooking as if she owned the place. In just 3 days, she looked as though she had aged a decade. Her face was swollen and scratched, clear signs that she'd been attacked. Apparently, the Cole family hadn't gone easy on her either. When she saw me, hatred twisted her face. She pointed a trembling finger at me and shrieked, "You vile little snake, you wicked girl! How dare you show your face here? Just wait and see how I deal with you." She'd come to vent her frustration and regain the dignity she had lost, but I wasn't about to let her. I grabbed her by the hair and slapped her across the face again and again until her screams filled the room. Then I dragged her out by the hair, kicking the door open, and threw her into the dirt outside. "This is my house," I said coldly. "If you ever set foot in here again, I'll beat you every single time." Mrs. Brown's face was a bloody mess, bruised, swollen, her nose bleeding, her mouth cut. She'd never been humiliated like that in her life. She shrieked that she'd call the police. I crossed my arms and waited. When the officers arrived, I handed them the divorce certificate, proving that Michael and I were no longer married. I also told them that the house had been left to me by my parents, that neither Michael Carter nor Mrs. Brown had any claim to it whatsoever. By then, Michael's scandal had spread all over town, so the police already knew who I was. They understood that I was the victim in all of this. After listening to both sides, they scolded Mrs. Brown harshly and ordered her to leave my property immediately. Defeated and humiliated, she limped away, her face pale with rage and fear. That same evening, I packed up every belonging that had ever belonged to Michael and Emily, clothes, photos, personal items, and threw them all into the trash. My debts had been settled. Michael Carter and Carl Moore were both vile men. I had never harmed them, yet they had conspired to destroy me. Now that they had suffered heavy losses at my hands, I knew they wouldn't let things go easily. As the saying goes, cornered dogs will jump the wall, and guard against others as you would a thief. I knew better than to stay where danger still lingered, so I made my decision. I would sell the house and my job and move south. I priced the house at $3,000 and the job for another $1,000. The price was so low that buyers lined up immediately. By the end of the day, I'd closed the deal, received the cash, and bought a train ticket. That night, I left town without looking back. I headed south, to Shenzhen, just as the winds of reform and open trade were sweeping across the country. With the money I had, I started a small clothing business. At first, I ran a humble stall on the street. Later, I opened a storefront. In just 3 years, I owned 10 shops and had become a successful businesswoman. One crisp autumn evening, after dinner, I walked out of a restaurant toward my car when I suddenly heard someone call my name. "Anna. Anna Lewis." I turned and saw Mrs. Turner. It had been years since we last met. She'd put on a little weight, but her round, cheerful face was the same. Smiling brightly, she hurried toward me, grabbing my hands. It really is you. You've made it big, haven't you? You look so young and beautiful now. I thought it was you when I first saw you, but I didn't dare to ask. Mrs. Turner had once helped me during my darkest days, and I never forgot that kindness. Grateful, I invited her to dinner. Over the meal, she told me that the factory she'd worked at had closed, and she'd come south to look for work. My stores were growing and short-staffed, so I asked if she'd like to help me manage one. Her eyes lit up instantly, and she agreed without hesitation. As we ate, she began to tell me what had happened after I left town. 2 weeks after you moved away, she said, Michael Carter was kicked out of the hospital because he couldn't pay the medical bills. He had the nerve to try moving back into your old house, but when he got there, he found it already had new owners. You were gone, and no one knew where you'd gone. With nowhere else to go, Michael had no choice but to take his mother, Mrs. Brown, back to his rural hometown. He'd been expelled from the army, lost his job, and was blind in one eye. No one would hire him. He ended up working the fields, just to survive. But Michael couldn't handle that kind of downfall. He became violent, yelling at Mrs. Brown every day, sometimes even hitting her. Knowing he could never return to the army or live the life he once had, he started clinging to the only thing left, Emily Ross. He thought, Mrs. Turner continued, shaking her head, that after all he'd sacrificed for her, she'd at least stay loyal. He truly believed she loved him. Michael decided to move in with Emily, but when he went to find her, she threw cold water in his face, literally and figuratively. In the past, Emily had chased after him because of his status as an officer. Now that he was blind, unemployed, and disgraced, he was nothing to her. She wanted nothing to do with him. Michael refused to leave her alone. Finally, frustrated, Emily snapped and told him the truth. She said, Mrs. Turner whispered, that he wasn't even the only man she'd been with. He was just one of many. She'd only gone after him because she wanted a comfortable life. Now that he was a cripple with no job, he disgusted her. And she told him the baby she lost wasn't his at all. It was Carl Moore's. Michael went berserk. He beat her viciously and tried to force her to go with him. They were screaming, fighting, neither willing to back down, when the Cole family arrived. Carl Moore was now permanently disabled. The Cole family demanded that Emily, as the one who caused it all, take responsibility for him for the rest of his life. Faced with a choice between a blind, ruined Michael and a crippled Carl, Emily chose Carl. At least he was still alive and breathing. Michael was furious. Emily left him behind without a second thought, and when the Cole family saw him trying to interfere, they beat him again, even worse than before. After that, Michael slunk back to his hometown with Mrs. Brown, humiliated and broken. Everyone thought that was the end of it, Mrs. Turner said grimly. But 2 weeks later, Michael came back, with a butcher's knife in his hand. He snuck into Carl's house while everyone was asleep. He slaughtered them both, Carl Moore and Emily Ross, on the spot. The blood ran from inside the house all the way to the street. They said it was horrifying. She lowered her voice. He didn't even try to run. He turned himself in and confessed everything. 6 months later, he was executed by firing squad. I closed my eyes for a moment, absorbing the words. I had already expected this ending. A man as vicious, cruel, and shameless as Michael Carter was capable of anything. I had lived and died once at his hands. That was why I'd fled when I did, to avoid another tragedy, to stay out of reach of his madness. Now he was gone. Carl Moore and Emily Ross were gone too. For the first time in years, I felt an immense weight lift from my heart. With all those rotten people erased from my life, I could finally breathe freely. From now on, I would live for myself. I would cherish my freedom, my peace, my hard-earned happiness. This time, I would truly be happy. This is where my story ends. Thank you for listening until the very end. Tiny Storytime YT wishes you health, peace, and happiness in life.